All right, awesome. Hi, folks. Great to see everyone joining us this morning. Thank you all for joining us. We are in our first Zoom recorded session here of how we recover. We're going to be discussing identity today. So I have some other folks I'd like to introduce. I guess first I'll start with Lydia. I use any pronouns, and I am the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation. And it's really great just to be here and to partner with Eat, Breathe, Thrive and be able to spread hope and inspiration about folks that are living their lives in recovery, and be able to answer some questions and just have a very natural, casual conversation. So, Victoria, I'll hand it off to you if you'd like to introduce yourself next, and then we can pop up to Kevin and Chelsea.
Thanks, Lydia. I'm Victoria. My pronouns are she, her. I am a community member at Eating Disorder Foundation. I have been a part of a couple of different events that they've had, and I'm super, super honored to be here.
Yeah, my name's Kevin. My pronouns are they, them. Yeah, and I'm just an advocate and like speaker out in the eating disorder world, specifically talking about like harm reduction and ARFID and neurodivergence and all that jazz.
All right, and I'm Chelsea. I'm the director, the executive director, founding director. I keep choosing different names at Eat, Breathe, Thrive. And I'm so happy to be here and really grateful to be that we're here collaborating with the Eating Disorder Foundation and with amazing humans like Kevin, Victoria, to have this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for being here. I'll get us started with our first question, and then we'll kind of bounce around and just answer. We can take time between questions too, just to consider and think about what we want to say. I don't want anyone to feel pressured or rushed. But the first question that I was thinking about was, what was your connection with yourself like before developing an eating disorder? So this can obviously look a lot of different ways, but this one I really like to think about just like the contrast of how just how I viewed myself and what that looked like before. So I'd love to hear from one of y'all first, and then I'll wrap us up with that.
Yeah, I can go first. I like to think of it more as like who was I before I like knew about ARFID. Just because when we look at ARFID from like the lens of neurodivergence, I think it's always been there. There just wasn't language for it. So yeah, I like to think about like who I was 4 or 5 years ago before I had the language, and it was just like a very like isolated and lonely experience of like nobody actually understands what's going on. Like there isn't a word for this. Lots of like shame and guilt. And now that I have the language and like have the community and like am creating like webs of connections and all that jazz. I'm not like proud of living with an eating disorder, but it's less like shamey and judgy and more like this is what it is, and like how am I gonna like handle that as it comes instead of like woe is me, it's the end of the world kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it, like before having knowledge versus now having knowledge.
Yeah, Kevin, I really like that point. I think I relate in that experience that until I became aware of what an eating disorder looks like or feels like, or the experience of when I didn't know how to call or what to call my pain or what my struggle was, I just knew that I was having a really hard time. For me, to that point, I now that I'm aware of what an eating disorder for me looks like, I'm not sure that I experienced life before an eating disorder at a conscious level or pre-development. And so in recovery, I'm still discovering who I am outside of that lens. Yeah, and so it's both a wonderful and crazy and wild experience, and it can be very scary at times because you're stepping into a very, very, very big unknown. And I'm super grateful to be on this spot in my journey right now.
Sorry, I've forgotten how to unmute myself. God, that's such a rich question. I resonate with everything you've both said, Kevin and Victoria. my eating disorder, I'm pretty far along in my recovery now, just in terms of time. Like it's been about 19 years. So this was such a rich question for me to think back to, but mine started really, really young. And I think I similar to you, Victoria, it's hard to it's not that I don't think I had a life, but there was so little awareness of me in relationship to my experience of suffering, which is what, there was a lot of pain at that time. I was young, I was, before puberty and during puberty, and my body's changing, and there was a lot of trauma in my household and all that stuff. And I think I was so in the pain that I didn't have really words for it. And I didn't have separation from it. I couldn't name it, observe it. And I also didn't, when the eating disorder started, I didn't even know that's what I was using to cope with pain. I just was what I did. So yeah, my relationship with myself has changed a lot. Yoga and meditation have been really big parts of my recovery and creating a little bit of space. But I think, I don't know, it's not like being blind, but just a complete, just being so in the chaos of the difficult experiences that it's hard to have separation.
I love hearing y'all's perspectives on it, because I feel like, yeah, we each come from a different perspective, from a different stage of onset. I love the thought of like having the language around to what we're experiencing, because I feel like that is such a big part of it, for like a lot of people not knowing what eating disorders are, for us that experience them, that we might not even realize what we were yeah, like I think Chelsea, like way of saying, like, didn't even know what I was doing to cope, but this was what it was. So getting that language, I think, is super helpful and important, and that's why I think just opening up these conversations feels so critical. For my thought of it, I like to do this kind of like every once in a while. I like to think back about like how I felt about myself and who I was before developing my eating disorder. And I feel like my sense of self and my like identity and my like feeling connected to myself was like almost not there. I had a later onset of an eating disorder. So I developed my eating disorder during my early years of college. But I feel like before that, it felt like almost like, again, now this is me reflecting like 10 years down the road, but looking back, it's like, I felt like I was just doing what I was like, felt like I was following a script of like, this is what they do in the movies. This is what I should be doing. This is how I like be a human. And this is like, I have to join this like sport. I have to date this person. Like it felt like a prescription that I was following. So I feel like I didn't even have a concept of what self-connection could look like, because I was constantly viewing myself from like an external perspective that put a lot of pressure on myself to feel like I had to be one specific way. So I like thinking about that, because I'm like, wow, I know that like I would never wish anyone the development of an eating disorder, but I do feel like my eating disorder forced me to like develop a relationship with myself that like I may not have had otherwise. So again, I don't want to make like a silver lining of it, but I think that experience for me and being able to like build a relationship with myself in recovery has been like a really profound thing to experience throughout my 20s. So yeah. Chelsea, you want to pop on to our next question?
Sure. Yeah, that was a great question, Lydia. And I'll also just say to everyone here, I welcome you if you want to answer this question, if you feel comfortable dropping an answer into the chat, you're so welcome to. And our kind of overarching topic today is identity and who am I without my eating disorder. So if a question bubbles up as you're listening to someone, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or even raise your hand. We are recording, so if you raise your hand and are on video and ask it, then you'll be in the recording. So just be aware of that. But yeah, we for those who are here, we want to invite you to interact. My question kind of emerges from what Lydia just shared, and it's a little bit around how has your identity changed over the course from that time of before eating disorder to having an eating disorder to now being in recovery?
I can speak to this. I feel as I'm still discovering parts of myself that I didn't know existed, that are excited to be free outside of an eating disorder. I think that my understanding of preferences in all walks of life from my gender to my sexuality to the types of foods that I like to how I interact with people to the words that I use to the dialogue I'm willing to not have. I think after recognizing the pain of an eating disorder and going through recovery, I'm able to discern a little bit more what actually feels good and what actually doesn't feel good. And I think that for me, it shows up in every area of my life. And I so look forward to the day where that's not so much chewing on the question as often, as long, and as hard. And I can just be like, oh yeah, yes, oh yeah, no, like cool, let's go this way. So I think that's the difference. Is I really struggled in an eating disorder with a lot of shame. I had to do this, I had to do this, I had to do that. And now it's like, I don't think I do. I don't think I have to do that. So that's I think for me, my experience in that question.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that really hard. I think it's like a similar thing of like going from like this like woe is me, I don't know what's wrong, this is gonna kill me, like very pit of despair, and like being in the diet culture world of like, okay, well, this is how it works, this is how it happens, step by step, like recovery is the end goal 100%. That was like pre-learning about like liberated spaces and like about harm reduction. And then when I stepped into like, first of all, understanding ARFID, and then second of all, like learning more about harm reduction and like compassion, and that like eating disorders aren't the worst thing to happen in the world. Like they're very much a coping skill. And like once I learned like the self-compassion part of like, yeah, some days you're just going to engage in an eating disorder. And if it's like you restrict a little bit or you're like not living on the world anymore, I don't know, I'm going to simply pick probably engaging with an eating disorder. So yeah, it's like Victoria said, taking the like shame and guilt and like grief part and like still dealing with the grief in it, but like making room for the grief instead of like shoving it away, and like making room to understand that like not always going to be at 100%. The world was not designed for folk like me to be at 100%. Like I'm going to do what I can do. And like you said, Victoria, like it's not always going to be 100. Sometimes you're going to show up 40%, sometimes 20, sometimes 80, and like all of those are just as good as the last one, and like your best is your best. So I think changing, the biggest thing has been like the change in the way my mind like gives myself grace and like uses harm reduction, and like the community I'm surrounding myself with. Like I don't engage with the community that's like, yeah, no, you're either recovered or not recovered. And it's like, okay, well, everything is a spectrum, everything is fake, everything is like binaries aren't real, all of that jazz. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like the shift in perspective and the shift in like community and who I surround myself with. Yeah.
I love hearing that. And I love hearing just like, again, the grace that we have with recovery, and to be able to be like, yeah, it's not like, again, the like either recovered or not, like that kind of language puts it in such a like black and white space, which it like, again, anytime we're using a binary, it feels so conflicting to me, because I'm like, well, that's what we're supposed to be like practicing, is like having this fluidity in the middle. And I think intention and fluidity are things that I really identify with as it comes to like my identity and how it's shifted and like ebbed and flowed throughout the years. I, after my first trip to treatment, I had a relapse and had to return to treatment. And I think that really was like a very humbling experience for me, and just being like, I was so confident when I left, and I was like, I'm good. I'm never going to think about this again. I'm never going to struggle again. We're good to go. And then within a year, I was returning and just going through that experience and saying like, oh, wow, I'm going to need more support in this. It really forced me to like, again, I think check that shame and be like, wow, I was still carrying some when I left, because I like didn't want to have to bring in more people to help me. I didn't want to have to let all of these new people in my life know what I needed and that I actually had needs. So that's been something that I think just was like the start of like really being like, I have to be intentional about this. That then has allowed space for the fluidity. But I think the intention had to be there for like so long to be able to be like, okay, now I'm like into that space where it's like there's preferences with things, and I didn't feel like, again, like it was like, is this my eating disorder? Is this? Now it's like there's a very clear distinction that I'm like, oh no, we can have preferences and that's okay, and to like learn that. yeah, and then it's the same thing. I think talking about preferences and the expansion of like identity, just like gender identity, also for me, like sexuality, sexual orientation, like all of these things that again, I felt like I was like living in the binary of like, and like following that script of things that I had to like do. And then this allowed space and I was like, oh, there's not just like one way to be. And I can actually like check in with myself and see what's resonating, see what I actually like, what parts of myself I identify with strongly, like whether that's being like more feminine or more masculine and carrying different traits and like being like, oh, I don't feel like I really like feel strongly about either and like allowing that to just like be a daily experience. It's been really, really eye-opening to see the world in a different way and to like unlearn a lot of things that I learned from growing up in a small suburb, you know, in the Midwest. Like I think that like again moving across country, like there's so many things that just like I feel like shifted my mindset from being, yeah, just very following the rules to being like, okay, I can actually like create a space that like works for me and keeps me safe and connected and alive. So I love that. I love thinking about this question.
Oh my gosh, so much good stuff here. I keep getting like lost in tangent trains of thoughts from everything you all are sharing. Wow, beautiful. Okay, wow. So yeah, I maybe thought about this question a little bit differently, but I resonate with everything you all just shared. I was thinking kind of in my term, and since my sense of identity, well, yeah, my when I was in the middle of my eating disorder, it was, I guess what I was saying before, it was just all encompassing. And there was a weird part of it too that I remember where I almost got attached to this sick identity, if that makes sense. Like it actually became a huge, it wasn't a good part of my identity, but I was very attached to it. And everybody else was attached to it. It's how they saw me. You know, I was clearly ill. And um, so that was I remember that period very strongly. And, you know, sometimes people would pity me or, you know, sometimes people would feel like they had to take care of me, but all of that, it affected how I saw myself as well, right? And I didn't have a real strong sense of agency. I think what you were all saying, Victoria and Lydia, about preferences and needs and all of that. Yeah, I really resonate with all of that because I didn't feel particularly empowered, I think. And then I remember this other phase when I got into recovery and I was really committed to recovery and I was like, okay, where it was like the eating disorder kind of retreated to this place that I didn't want anybody to know about it. And so I was trying to grapple with my identity in terms of, oh God, I had this terrible thing that I felt so much shame. And I wasn't quite sure when to tell people or if to tell people, wasn't sure if others. And so it was this weird transition period where um, it was huge. It was huge in my mind. It was really big. It was a huge part of my identity, but I didn't want anybody to know about it. And I felt really scared and all of that. And then there was another period where I started like practicing telling people about it. And I was trying to navigate, who am I if I've had an eating disorder or have an eating disorder even? It was just this weird. And then I'm trying to say this briefly, but there's been a period over the past, like, I don't know, probably 5 to 10 years, maybe 5 to 7 years, where there's no charge around it. It is a part of me that all of that happened. And oh my God, it was so painful. And like I hold all of it. Like I could cry right now thinking about that pain. And I love that little girl who had that. And that has I am like it's also morphed into my life has become about ensuring that other people have support in that pain. And so it's so beautiful. You know, there's no charge in that. And it's made me a better person. So it's become a small, but also very large um, part of my life. Like it's not the most important part of my identity. Yeah, I say to people all the time, oh yeah, I used to have an eating disorder. Doesn't doesn't faze me whatsoever. But it's huge in how it nourishes me and how meaningful it is to be in community with people like you. So yeah, that's my journey. Identity continuing to evolve. All right, Lydia, off to you before I really start crying.
Which is also totally okay. I know. I think about like holding that space for like when we were in the pain and being able to identify that and say like, yeah, it makes like for me, like I love to use the language of like, it makes sense. It makes sense that that's what I was experiencing at that time, looking back at it and being able to reflect on all of the factors and being able to like hold that space, but also like move through the steps to be where you're at now, right? Like it's like so I think that like it feels like embodying empowerment and being like, yep, like that's just it's part of it, but it's not like it's part of me, but it's not the whole me. And now it's not something that brings up that charge. I love that word. Um, I love it. I'm like, now I want us all to go into more. Yeah, Victoria.
Yeah,
hop in.
I have to because that's so rich and so deep and so good. I really want to also touch on the charge part because I think for so long when I was in active recovery, I didn't understand that there was people in the world who didn't have an eating disorder. So anything anybody ever said, even though I was taking the correct steps for me, felt like an attack. And it was still a very triggering experience of you don't see me, you don't understand what you're saying is harmful. And so I think being maybe the time in recovery that I've had has allowed me to be able to also hear other people's experience, either with any type of relationship to food or movement or body or self or others or their place in the world. I'm able to separate myself from my experience with an eating disorder and hear exactly where they are. Yeah, and I personally didn't think that I would ever come to a place where I could hear everybody's experiences on this spectrum. And I'm currently in classes where we're discussing things that in the past may have either triggered, activated, or caused a relapse. And now I'm able to see that it was nice. I had that moment also of like, oh, I can hear that. I can hear the truth in that. And it doesn't mean anything about me necessarily. And I'm still pretty like, let's teach the world about eating disorders because nobody knows anything and we got to do this work.
I so relate to that. Yeah, I think that like thinking about that perspective of how it changes from feeling like a personal attack to then feeling like, okay, this is something that I can hear and it doesn't like cause like an internal reaction as much as it causes like some thoughts to just like be like, oh yeah, I can be curious about that and question it without it being like, why is this person saying this? And they're hurting me, they're doing it intentionally. But that's what I really resonate with that because I think for a while I was like, oh, like if someone would mention something about diet culture around me, I would feel like, how dare you? Like, and then I'm like, oh no, our world is like saturated and steeped in diet culture. So like helping myself feel like I'm able to like feel, yeah, like embodied in my experience and be like, yeah, that's how people are going to talk. And I'm going to, you know, have a really difficult time navigating this if I like don't help feel confident in myself and feel like, yeah, like just like confident in my steps in recovery. Oh, I love it. Next question that I have, how was the connection? Oh, how has that connection looked like since finding your recovery? So wondering if we kind of already like touched on that. Because I feel like we've all kind of like explored that. And Chelsea, I think your last question really like allowed us to move into that. So I'll skip on to the next one. What has your recovery created space for in your life?
I can go. Probably like again like the self exploration, the like finding self, I suppose, and like leaving room for like it doesn't always look exactly how the textbooks might say it looks. And like that grace giving. Because I don't identify fully. I don't know. Recovery is a spectrum. But yeah, it's like yeah, just like giving myself grace and room to like ebb and flow, and like have differing opinions, and like every day is just a different opportunity, a different day. And instead of like this very like this is how it's going to be forever, it's like no, every morning I get to like make that cautious decision about like what the day is going to be, which is pretty rad. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing is that like self-discovery and room to explore things without too much judgment, or making room for the judgment to also, coexist.
I would say that recovery has made space for people who actually care about my well-being. Period. Yeah, just, I mean, I think that in my eating disorder, I tended to gravitate towards people who reinforced those behaviors or beliefs that I held about myself. And so recovery allowed me to start recognizing spaces that empowered me. I don't know who used that word, but I really liked that. That would recognize my needs, sometimes even before I knew I needed them, and would reinforce my worth and my value and my curiosity and my exploration of self without having to be in a certain box or a certain way. So I would say that it's made space for community and the people that actually love and care about Victoria to her core, and how she's doing in the world.
Wow, I resonate with that so much, Victoria. Yeah, I I'm basically saying the same thing in a different way, but the first thing that came to mind was, and this sounds so cheesy, I can't believe I'm about to say this, was it love? but, but really like love in all of its forms. I know that so many people here will be kind of in the work of recovery, I assume, and I just like, I'm trying to explain it to think of how to say it in a way that will make sense if you're in that work right now. But they're in the midst of an eating disorder and in the midst of recovery, there was so much struggle and so much self-judgment, and really so much I couldn't have even named it, but self-hatred. I didn't want to nourish my body. I didn't want to love my body. I didn't want to be seen or loved by others. And um, something about the process of recovery, I think Lydia spoke to it earlier, really, it's work. You really, psychological work, emotional work, physical work, all of it. And something about that work on the other side of it, there's just so much more space for love. So much, I've been in a relationship for almost 3 years now, which would never have happened. Ever. And there's so much love, like it's just wonderful. And I'm so much more loving toward myself effortlessly without needing to try. I can participate in sport without hurting myself, like physically and, emotionally, like in a joyful way, loving my body, loving my life, so, yeah, there's a lot of room for love, and it's worth the work. I don't know why I came out of it with love. I don't know how that ended up with love, but that's what. So it's yeah.
That's super relatable. I think that like we forget that like that is a piece that does get lost in the eating disorder, is like that like disconnect. And even if we like had love around us, I'll speak for myself, that I had love around me and like was always being told that I'm loved and supported, it still felt like that was something that I couldn't connect with. And that it was something that was like, okay, I can hear it, but like my body doesn't feel that. And my, like my sense of self has no connection to that, because I don't think I never even explored that question if I felt like I loved myself or even liked myself. So I think love is something that, yeah, it seems so like, yeah, of course, love, has come from it, but really like that, I think feeling the expansiveness of love and knowing that sometimes there's going to be pain in that and grief and heartbreak and, like there's just so much to it. But I think that that's what's like, when I think about this question for myself, I think it's my recovery's created space for me to be able to like actually feel the full range of like really difficult emotions and not feel like I need to like escape them like instantly. And if I don't like something, to not be super reactive and to be like, well, this is all done, and to be like so all or nothing. And this is a continual evolution for me that I don't think like I'm, I'm still in the work of like this part of my journey of being like, yeah, there are so many times where I like fall into black and white thinking still. And like that will pop up into different areas. And I'm like, now I like feel like I can sit though in the distressing situations of like being rejected, of, like navigating really difficult conversations, all of those things that I'm like, I did not have the space for even being able to like acknowledge that I could be angry and not react in that moment and not be completely connected with my anger, like fully and presenting and harming others, harming myself with that. Like, so it's really cool to now be able to say, like, yeah, like I can hold space for those things and it doesn't feel like it's going to be my permanent emotion forever. And I now get to experience everything and like experience them fully. Which means, yeah, the pain of heartbreak, of loss, all of that, but also like the love and the connection and actually feeling what it feels like to be held by someone else and to be able to say, like, I can trust you. I can be dependent on you, because for a long time I felt like I couldn't be dependent and that that wasn't a word that I should ever identify with because that meant I was weak. Um, so I think for me, yeah, just being able to like hold space for all of that and give myself grace with like wanting to try new things. I like really like to give myself that freedom to be like, hey, if I want to go try horseback riding, I'm going to go do that. If I want to go to this concert that I normally don't go to, I'm going to do that. And allowing myself to try on different things and test out and see what feels like me. So yeah, lots of, I feel like freedom again feels like cliche, but like freedom to like feel things, to explore things, to not be great at things, and to be okay with that, and to like recognize that I can just be okay. And that's like really comforting for me.
It's beautiful. I hear so much self-trust in what you're talking about, Lydia. Yeah. I'm going to go to a question from the audience, and I actually do think it kind of has to do with identity as well. So I'm going to take your question, also kind of connect it to identity, if that's okay. But this question is there any suggestions on how I can help my daughter who's currently in recovery from anorexia and getting over the hump of focusing so much on her body, which she hates? She says things like, I'm fat, I'm ugly, everyone else is skinny, she's eating well and in therapy. So I think that's a great practical question, and I want to wrap it into a question there, which is how do you think about your body in relationship to your identity now in recovery? And it may be different from when you were in the midst of an eating disorder, but has that shifted? And you can also answer her question directly. so this,
Yeah.
so there's plenty there.
Yeah, I have thoughts on the direct question. As just like a person living in like a disabled body and like a chronically ill body and like a queer body, I don't think I'm ever going to be at a point that I'm like, wow, I love myself. I don't think that's like a realistic expectation for where I am right now. But I can meet my body with like a lot of softness of like, wow, I love that like my brain allows me to like interact with people in this way, and I love that my legs carry me to watch the sunrise every morning. And like very focusing on just like the very mechanical parts of my body. Because like, no, I don't love, I can list 101 things that I am not particularly fond of. And giving that like the attention isn't super helpful, but giving the attention of like, wow, I love my memory because it like reminds me to take my meds and check in on my friends, or like, I love how compassionate and funny I am because it like brightens up a room and makes people feel better. So like I'm very, very, very good at like being a very non-judgmental, very neutral kind of towards myself. And on the flip side of that, we love a dialectic of like some days are just gonna suck and it's like, wow, I really hate my body today. Like that sucks. And like I'm gonna still like take a shower and I'm still gonna like make the bed and like have a cozy drink and a treat, or like I'm still gonna go outside and see the world, even though I'm feeling this way, and tying in like the harm reduction of it. And it's like, okay, if you don't love your body today, like, yeah, sure, maybe I'm not gonna like run out to the beach in a Speedo today, but like I might like go outside with like my shirt off to go get the mail, or if I don't want to like eat in a restaurant full of people because that's like very anxiety provoking. Like maybe we can order out and like have a picnic. So I think a lot of it for me is like the harm reduction and the compassion part of like this shit is hard and it's never going to look and like be super easy and like how media portrays it. And like some days are just trash and like not every day is trash. And something I've been like repeating to myself, especially with like recent health stuff going on, is like it's been hard and it's been easy before. And like it's been really shitty and really difficult and really lonely. And it's been so compassionate and loving and like full of grace. So like holding the dialectic. And I think too, like not having these big expectations. Like, first of all, like I said, like the world has not been set up for us all to like love each other or love ourselves. Hopefully we all love each other, love ourselves like immediately and like jump into like, I love myself affirmations every day, but like the slow little steps add up to the bigger steps. And my last thought is something me and my fiance do is we mirrors are really difficult and it's just like not worth the effort of like trying not to look in the mirror because sometimes it's just going to happen. So what we do is like we put affirmations on the mirror. So we like have whiteboard markers and we'll like either write little love notes to each other. Right now we have like a wedding countdown happening, or like if I know my fiance is really struggling, I'll like draw a silly top hat and like an eyeglasses. So when you stand in the mirror the right way, you're just like dressed as a silly little thing. So again, it's like finding the spots to be like, yes, this sucks. This is hard. This was not meant to work the way I want it to work. And I'm still going to be soft. I'm still going to be compassionate, and I'm still going to like give myself the tiniest bit of grace. And if not, I'm going to do the harm reduction thing of like, again, like if it's life or eating disorder, like grace in the eating disorder part of it.
I love everything you said, Kevin. So much. Absolutely. I think that I'm so happy to hear that from you. Thank you for shining light on disabled bodies, on chronically ill body, on queer body, on the fact that we might not get to a place where we love our bodies every day. I think I feel especially resonant with that. First, I guess I would like to address the question and say that I'm not a licensed counselor, and I think that everybody's experience is very different. And I want to validate how much work and love is being shown as a mother to be curious enough to attend something like this for your daughter. Even if it feels like it's not a direct gauze on the wound, it is an incredibly crucial step to getting her to a place that you would love to see your baby girl in. For myself, I think that my recovery from an eating disorder allowed me to touch trauma that was protected by the eating disorder. And so recovery from an eating disorder was actually just a layer that allowed me to start to do body work. So I'm actually not at a place in my life where I can actively have, and I don't know if I know anybody who has that kind of relationship with their body, but I think that they should be speaking on a TED Talk and I'll listen to that. But I'm not at a place where I catch myself criticizing my body a lot. And I'm able to see that I'm criticizing my body, and I'm able to say, I still deserve love. I still deserve nourishment. I still deserve a little treat. I still deserve a little snacky snack. Whatever it is that brings like pleasure and goodness and fun and excitement and play and creativity and curiosity to my system, I still deserve that, even if I don't feel like I deserve that. I think that yes, I'll leave it there. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, I can jump in. I just got a question within this question as well. So I see the question, the person who just sent it. So wow, yes, I agree with everything you're saying, Victoria, that and Kev, want to just put words to something, like some words that I've used for what you talked about in the beginning of like you don't necessarily love your body, but you love what it does. You love, like, being able to walk up a flight of stairs or see, be here and be participatory. In research, they call that functional appreciation of the body. So it's appreciating the functionality of your body rather than what it does. And I would say to the wonderful mom who's here for her daughter, I would say, I mean, one, in my experience with body image issues in recovery, it is the last thing that got any better for me. So it is struggle city for a while. And I think what's challenging is, and I think Kev spoke to this really, really well, that there's a point where you just want to completely disconnect from the body, where you're like, I hate my body, I don't like it, I've just got to close my eyes and do what I need to do to recover. But I think what maybe is a more powerful, like what will behoove you more in recovery long term, or your daughter, is taking the focus off of what the body looks like and thinking about what the body can do. So really fostering appreciation for the things. And I would just look for the joy there, which can be really hard when somebody's in the midst of struggle, but look for the places of joy. Where do you see her smile? And remind her that her body is holding that experience. One of the big insights, I mean, I may be one of the only, I feel pretty good about my body most days, but it has nothing to do with what it looks like. And that has just become so, like, I'm getting older, and I'm just going to keep getting older, and my body's going to break. And some days I'm sick, and I'm in a privileged body. So that's a bit of an easier thing for me right now. I don't have chronic and debilitating illness, which, is a huge privilege. But I think that's taking the focus off of the aesthetic is really big. And to the person that's just submitted a question, it was around how do you deal with the period in a restrictive eating disorder recovery where you're having to gain weight and maybe the weight goes to places you don't want, or there's uneven distribution of weight. It's real. It's real. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say it's not. It is real. And that my advice to you, you're going to need this for your whole life. Your love of your body should not come from how it looks, because as life happens, if you lose a limb, if you're all of that, you don't want to have to start this whole process over again. So, I would do the work now to foster appreciation for your body, not based on it being able-bodied, but based on all of the functionalities that it allows you to do. Connect with other human beings, hug your dog, feel the wind on your face, all of those things, and really meditate and contemplate and be with this. That's where meditation comes in. That would be my advice on both of those. And know with the anorexia redistribution, it evens out. It's just short term. I promise it evens out. And it just sucks. It just sucks while it's happening. But it gets better. I promise it gets better.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that sometimes too, especially for like when I'm working with like neurodivergent people, they'll like sometimes not focusing on like the feelings part and like the body, but like the psychoeducation part of it is like, no, your body is like a set point weight, and like literally explaining what a set point, like your body is going to be where your body needs to be, and like here are the things to get there. Like if I was working with a kid who was like severely worried about like getting in a larger body, it was like, okay, well, what you're doing now is just like prolonging either a lot of suffering or like a lot of just fighting to get to this point that is just never going to happen. And in return, like your body's just going to be where your body's going to be. And I think sometimes taking out the feeling of it and like being very educational is helpful for some brains of like the why. And like, I feel like a lot of treatment facilities and like groups are like, why? It's just like, well, because like this is just what happens when you recover. And it's like, okay, well, sometimes knowing like, no, this is why it's happening step by step from like a genetic standpoint, from like a diet culture standpoint, X, Y, and Z, for like factual things to latch onto. Because like not affirmations, like I am not a fan of affirmations. I don't like run around yelling affirmations, But when like it's really difficult to eat a meal, I'm like, okay, well, like I'm going to a concert tonight and you can't really like jam out at a concert and like have fun with your friends if you like aren't eating. And I think another super helpful tip that I always go back to is like tying things to my values. And like if I like, for example, don't want to eat lunch today, it's like, okay, Kevin, well, first of all, you would never say that to somebody else. You would never like encourage somebody to skip a meal. And second of all, like, how is not eating like aligning with my values of like treating myself with respect, and like how is that aligning with my value of like showing up for community, because I can't show up for community if I'm not eating. So I think sometimes the external factors too of like it doesn't always have to be tied to like I'm doing this for me. It can be like, well, I want to show up for my community, I want to show up for my future family, I want to show up for X, Y, and Z, or like be here for these moments. Yeah, I think we sometimes get too attached to like the internal like loving myself or like being neutral, and not like it's okay to lean on like the external factors of life too. But yeah, those are my extra few thoughts.
I love this. I love coming at it from so many different perspectives. I think it just adds so much because like every time one of you speaks, I get like, like more ideas. I'll do this a little quick bit and then I want to call on some people, get some more questions. But I think this is super important to address because I think that when you're in it, it feels like there's no end point to the process. It feels like you're kind of just like, okay, I'm stuck here and I'm gonna have these feelings about judging my body all the time. And what was really helpful for me was hearing people around me say like, hey, like your body's your body. I'm gonna love you. I am gonna support you like however it looks. And I want you to be like smiling and happy and experiencing things and like actually living, and not staying stuck in that comparison zone. So little quotes I love Pinterest. It's my preferred social media. But I have a little board that's all about like images that I resonate with. And there's one that I always come back to that's like, if we look at flowers, we can like appreciate all the different flowers, even though they like all look different. They're different sizes, heights, all of those things grow differently, grow at different times. And I don't compare the flowers because they're all beautiful and they all have different aspects of them that are like unique. So I try to view also like human bodies that way too, that I'm like, yeah, we like aren't all gonna look the same. We shouldn't all look the same. We do have so many factors, genetics, all of these things playing into it, that it's like I don't want to like live in a space of judgment of critiquing like my body compared to others, when we can all just exist and all bodies can be okay and be good and do what they need to do. So I think really like trying to step back from that comparison piece was really powerful, and hearing from people around me saying like your worth to me is not the size and shape of your body, and really trusting the process and knowing that like the weight is going to redistribute. That was something that I was like, I'm just going to hold on to hope for that, because I don't know what it's going to look like down the road, but I'm going to hold on to hope that things are going to shift. And they did. And just like having that openness about it and that like curiosity, even though it was painful and I was really uncomfortable and really like hated how my body looked when I was having to go through that process, it became so much less about that. The more, again, I connected to my values, I was able to take a step back from the comparison piece and be able to be like, okay, well, like being in a judgmental place doesn't align with the person that I want to be. And like, I don't want to have that taking up space when I could be more appreciative and like, yeah, find that space. So really tough, and trusting and acknowledging that like my body is going to look the way it does because this is where it needs to be in recovery. And like, it's not like important. Like I don't like think that that's an important part of like who I am, is the way that I look. And if that's what if that is important for people, I like probably not someone who really knows me that well, or that I want to like know me that well. That's going to be something that they're focused on. Yeah, it is tough. It is really tough, and body image definitely has been the longest experience. But similar to Chelsea, I also like can actively say that I don't judge my body and I don't critique it, and I'm not like I do like my body. I think that my body is fine, and that's where I'm at. Beautiful. Chelsea, would you like to call on some folks?
Sure. Yeah. So we've got a couple of hands up. So just ask you just to be mindful. We've got about 10 minutes left. We want to answer all the questions. So let's go with Mary first. I saw your hand go up. You just have to take yourself off mute to. That's okay. Mel, can you take Mary off mute by chance? Or can I? Oh, you know what?
I
I can
can't take
ask
her
you.
off mute, but Mary, I've sent you an invite right now. So if you just hit the OK button, it'll take you off mute.
Okay,
Oh,
I
there you
think
go.
I'm off,
Good.
right? Okay, great, thank you. First, I love the title of this, Who Am I Without My Eating Disorder? And that's what like drew me in, because I've always wondered who I would be without my eating disorder, like all the wonderful things I would be doing in my life and all the time I've wasted, having an eating disorder. And so I'm in a program now at Mass General Hospital in Boston, where I'm having to record everything and all that. It's very time consuming, but I'm actually doing it. But what I'm struggling with is that I'm, instead of feeling better, I'm feeling worse. And I just didn't know if that's a normal part of like withdrawal in the, when you're a compulsive, like a binge eater at night. And because I thought, I would feel clear, but actually I'm feeling more and more tired and more drained, and my nerve endings more and more raw. So I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if this is just to be expected. And I'm also getting older, and I've sort of, as much as body image played a part in my history, I think it was always that I was trying to, I was looking for like the optimum performance, like to eat in a way that would provide like the most mental clarity or optimum performance. And that's a kind of perfectionism. And, so I'm trying not to do that. But anyway, I'm sort of all over the place, but I still feel like, who am I without the eating disorder? And Victoria, when you talked about how when you stopped, with your eating disorder, that it was an opportunity for trauma to present itself, and also Lydia, you said for feelings, and boy, yeah, they're there right front and center, and it is hard to hold them, but I'm holding them and I'm here. So thank you.
Hell yeah.
I'm just going to suggest maybe we'll have one person answer and then we'll go to the next question. Does anybody feel a burning desire? Yes, Kev.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I don't know. I always compare like the first few weeks in treatment to just be the absolute worst weeks, because it's like Victoria said, you're just like uncovering the thing that has been like sheltering the actual shit going on, for lack of better words. But I think it's the same as like when you're diagnosed with like cancer or like an autoimmune disorder or something. It's like getting the diagnosis doesn't make you feel better. And like sometimes the thing like chemotherapy and like trying different medications, yeah, sometimes you just feel like absolute trash before you get like over the hump into feeling better. But I think, yeah, it's gonna suck at first. And I always, when I was working at like a higher level of care, by like the 3 week mark, everyone's like, why does this suck so much? Why is it terrible? And it's like, because you had like the hope that you were going to get help, and then you started getting the help, and then your eating disorder is like, holy cow, this is bad, like ramp it up, all while you're also trying to like learn how to re-nourish yourself. And there's like so many moving parts that like, no, I don't know anybody the first few weeks into treatment that's like, holy cow, I have never felt better. It's just like trash. It just feels really, really bad. And like you're doing it, you're showing up, and not only that, but you're like coming here and being vulnerable and sharing and doing the hard work. So I think it's already like starting, the glimmer of like, it's starting to, the fog is starting to fade, I feel, and like continuing to show up and do the things is like really admirable. Especially like, I don't know, I feel like as people like get older, this idea is that like it is what it is now, and it's like, no, like you still deserve to like enjoy your life without your eating disorder. And I don't think like wasting time, I don't really say I've like wasted time in my eating disorder. It's like I lived in it and I learned a lot, and yeah, it was really, really hard, and I learned so much, and like I would not be who I was without it. So trying to give yourself the compassion too of like, yeah, sure, you haven't done anything about it until now, but now you are. So like thinking about like, I haven't done it, okay, and now you are, and like you still can every single day. so yeah, like the grace and the compassion, and like you're doing it, and I think it's really cool that you're doing it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks, Kevin. Laura, we've got about 5 minutes. So do you want to give us a final question to wrap us up? Oh, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm working on my therapist on the difference between liking or loving traits about myself versus truly loving myself. And I didn't see that was I think my argument with my treatment team has been, well, those are two separate things. But their comeback to that is, do I love myself, or do I treat myself or care about myself with the same love and kindness that I do my friends, my family? And if I didn't fulfill that role, that helper role, then who would I be still? Or would I still like myself or love myself? And my answer would be probably not. So I don't know if I took away that, I took away my eating disorder, and I took away that I have a lot of chronic medical issues. I don't have a clue what would be left to be normal. So I guess anybody that wants to address that.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for your question. I think that something that we talked on kind of in a different way throughout the session was all of the things that we can look forward to as we recover. And I think that something that can be explored a lot more too is the amount of grief and loss that comes with what the eating disorder was doing for us. And so I'm hearing a lot about the different roles that your eating disorder has played for you in your relationships and how you see yourself in the world. I'm hearing a lot of fear, and correct me if I'm wrong, around what it's going to look like and in this abyss of unknown. Who is Laura? I think something that has helped me along the way, because I relate to that a lot, especially with, body image, is I have had to rely on other people, how other people saw me. So I had to borrow other people's beliefs. If my partner said these really incredible things about me, it was reinforced to me that I might not be in a place that I can believe that myself, but I can borrow his belief instead. I can borrow my mom's belief until I'm in a place where I can start integrating those beliefs as my own. And so my hope for you is that your treatment team and your people around you are good for you and supportive to you, and can offer you what they see in you, what the world sees in you, and what we all see in you. And you can borrow all of that from us until you get to a place where you can carry that for yourself.
I'm burning, Laura, too. To piggyback on what Victoria said, I don't no human is an island. Like no human exists by themselves. And you are not just those roles. You are not just any of those things, but they are part of you. And I don't think that you have to learn to love yourself completely separate from all of those things. If they're no longer serving you, then but like I'm so yoga-ish, but like there's a teaching in Buddhism about impermanence, around everything changes, right? Our roles change, our bodies change, everything changes and everything goes away. So I think being willing to be in that inquiry is okay. Like that, who am I? And it may be an exploration. It may be a transformation that's happening right now. But I don't think you have to learn to love yourself outside of who you are in the world, who you are in relationship to others, all of those things. And I would look for the joy. I would look for the joy. I would look for the comfort. I would look for the moments of ease and follow that. You know, it's that Joseph Campbell was saying, follow your joy. Is it joy? Something like that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think the
Follow your
difficulty-
bliss. Bliss, that's what it is.
I think the difficulty is that even in the multiple times I've been to treatment, I've never been able to get anywhere with the body image acceptance or neutrality even with it. So I just stay stuck. And I like those other things, but I never have gotten past the body hate.
Yeah. It's really tough. I think that we have all kind of honored that. And I think just because you haven't yet doesn't mean you won't.
I know we're out of time. Can I just make us a quick to that, Laura? I relate, and I feel like I'm hearing a lot of parallels between your difficulty in letting go of your role and who you are, and as we accept the changes to our body, inherently our role and who we are changes in the world as well. And so I hear that they might be linked, and I just wish so much for you.
Beautiful. Lydia, you want to close us off?
Would love to. I truly cherish these conversations. Recovery is my favorite thing to talk about. I could do it all day long. And I just want to honor everyone that was able to join us today. And for those of you that were able to ask questions, it takes so much to be able to confront what we're going through and to be able to name these things. And I am always going to hold on to the hope that each and every one of you are approaching your recovery from the way that feels like you're able to, and that there is hope for the continuation forward, however that looks. And it is never too late. And I just really have the utmost respect for everyone navigating their recovery journey. And we will be doing this again in the coming months. So we will look forward to getting some more panelists on, having some more discussions, and getting more questions from y'all. The recovery community is truly my favorite community. I feel like there is so much generosity, love, compassion, and I can't wait to keep spreading that with y'all. So thank you for joining us, and we will see y'all soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.